exactly. Grant Wall went on to make even a more interesting point, and that is his article was Olympic team failure leaves U.S. still searching for new stars. Have to say he's got a point. He asks, who are the gifted attacking players that are going to be the next Clint Dempsey and Landon Donovan? It's likely that Brazil 2014 will be the third straight World Cup in which Dempsey and Donovan are the U.S.'s top attacking threats. You would hope that someone would have stepped in by the time 2014 rolls around. Well, maybe someone will. And, I mean, Josie he just scored again, right?
He did.
So maybe he is stepping up, and to say, not mention him in that article maybe was just sort of, just didn't come to Grant's mind while he was writing the article. And then Boyd looked like, McBride with more athletic ability. Except, we still really don't know how Boyd will perform at the major level in the same circumstances, because these were not the big boys. These were U23s, right? So he looked awfully big. But I tell you what, when you get with the big boys, Boyd doesn't look as big compared to some of the center backs playing in Europe, etc.
Well, and you've got to look at it this way. When you put Boyd with the big boys, he's also surrounded by the big boys. So he has Clint Dempsey, he has Landon Donovan, he'll have Michael Bradley, Maurice Adu, rather than Okugu and our back line, for that matter.
Right.
Because our back line was unbelievably shaky at best,
right,
with the 23s. So I don't necessarily agree with this point, because you're looking at a tournament of under 23s playing together, whereas you look at the senior national team, you put, say, Corona in there as a late game sub, and he might have a moment of greatness because he's surrounded by other players who are up to that level. Not saying he's up to that level. I'm just using him as an example here.
Right.
But it's a completely different scenario. And we saw with, Freddie Adu with the senior national team, he has moments of greatness. But then again, he has, his liabilities as well. And we saw that with U23s as well. So, I don't really necessarily say that would be a great example, but you put him with different players who are seasoned vets who are up to that standard already, and it's a different scenario. I think we'll have players step up. Boyd's doing well with this club, although it is with the reserves. Whether or not he actually makes the senior or the first team, he is actually training with them. You have Andrew Wooten, who's scored another 2 goals this past weekend for his reserve side.
Yep.
We have young players doing well abroad.
Right.
And it's going to be brought up into the senior team. So I'm not overly concerned, although I would certainly love to find the next Clint Dempsey or Landon Donovan.
Yeah, I would too. And that
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And that gets me to, Leander Charlenkens had his article. I'm working on how to pronounce it.
I was going to say, you're going to get
I know.
You should learn how to pronounce his name before trying to say it on the air.
Exactly. Leander, I totally apologize, but I've never called you by your last name before. All right, Leander wrote an article, and he gave us the pluses and the minuses, and you just brought up that Freddie Adu did play, pretty good, and that was his second plus. Terrence Boyd, he got the biggest pluses from Leander. Mix Disgroot, I thought, did generally pretty well, and then he gave a big plus to Amobi Okugu. I thought that was fine. But and then his negatives really were the ones that got me, because yes, I agree with him. The defense was horrible.
Yeah.
Teal Bunbury, I did never imagine he would look that bad. Sean Johnson made that boo-boo, so But I think the bigger boo-boo was Bill Hamid's general play. Why would you put Sean Johnson on there? It was Bill Hamid, who played generally worse, except for Sean made one mistake, and then he gets on the list, right?
Yep.
It doesn't make any sense. So
I made that comment, too, when I read that. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
And then the one that really got me.
Together as goalkeeper, because he mentioned just the defense as a group. Why not lump the goalkeepers as a group?
Because they're, what are goalkeepers but defense? They keep the ball out of the net. Caleb Porter, he gave it negative for a lot of the same reasons Grant Wall and Matthew Doyle talked about. And then my big one was Joe Corona. He said played out of position, played too far forward, which only led to Joe Corona scoring a handbasket full of goals. So I would say to Leander in that one, I don't know what you're talking about, because his positioning was so good, he put in all those goals. So he must be doing something right and not something wrong. Anyhow, those are my thoughts on that. What about you?
I'm going to skip all the positives. I'll briefly go over them.
Yeah.
Boyd, there's not much to say we haven't already said. I thought he had great hold-up play, obviously finishing, and he showed heart. One of the only players on the team that actually showed heart.
Yep.
Adu, while I certainly thought that he certainly created the most goals for us, he was a spark that we needed from time to time. However, it seemed that he tried to make things too complicated.
Yeah.
Instead of just ripping an open shot with his right foot, he decides to bring it back over to his left and ends up getting dispossessed or deflected.
Right.
I saw that a couple times against El Salvador. It drove me crazy.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's smarter to play simple, stupid soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Mix, no pun, I guess pun intended. I have mixed feelings about this because there were.
You didn't just say that.
I did just say that. So,
all right.
I feel like he felt to possess it at times and distribute. However, there were also times where he was just simply trying to force it too much. I mean, he still would be a positive as far as the team is concerned, but he wouldn't be he'd be like a high middle ranking for me.
Yeah.
You could say.
But you have to like it when the announcer during the game versus El Salvador twice called him Mixarude.
I don't think I caught that.
I think he was a bit mixed.
I did catch the body, Terrence Body.
Terrence Body. He fixed that for the last game. He got Boyd right. But Mixarude, I like that. Yeah, I think the announcer was a little mixed up.
Yeah. We obviously both agree that the defense was shaky. Going into the negatives already. Yeah. What you said about Bunbury, I simply don't see him as international quality at this point.
I don't either.
All the qualities to it, but he's just not putting the pieces together.
No.
And maybe a year or two from now, he might be a contending player for a striker position, but not right now, Mike.
I agree. No.
We already mentioned the goalkeeper's not going to talk about that. The one thing I do want to talk about with Porter, though, that we didn't really talk about. We did talk about the formation and the tactical change and stuff like that, but I thought his player management was poor.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something, you have 3 games in 5 days. And you pretty much played the same squad minus a player or two, disregarding the whole injury with Agudelo.
Right.
But you're basically playing this. You have a relatively deep roster.
Yeah.
Deep player on the bench. Play your bench some. I don't think a lot of the same players should have played against Canada.
Right.
And you had a lot of the same players that played both those games play against El Salvador.
Right.
So I just think better player management could have gone a long way. And we saw with Canada. Canada came out with 7 different faces against the U.S. That they played against El Salvador.
Yeah.
So whether or not they played a weaker side against El Salvador and came out their A game against the U.S.,
they rolled the die.
Yeah,
we didn't.
But that was my big beef against them, really. But
yeah.
And then with Corona, I'm torn here because this is a player that can create magic. He can make some nice little passes, and obviously he has some good positional awareness because he did score 4 goals. Of course, 3 of them were against a man down or a 10-man Cuban side.
Yeah.
But he also would go absent. He'd become a ghost for a good portion of the game, and then show up with a touch, and then he'd be a ghost for a good portion of the game.
Yeah.
And I thought a lot of the problem was we started seeing Mix come back into the defense almost, opening up a lot of the midfield, and we saw Corona even push further back at points, which really took him out of the attack, which I thought was our strongest point, was keeping him up there with Bunbury, because he was one of the more dangerous sides if he got the ball in time to turn and look.
Right.
So he's kind of in the middle with me. I see a lot of positive, and he has a good eye for the game, but he needs to make sure that he's there all the time.
Right.